The brothers Karamazov. What if everyone knew who the real killer was and still couldn't stop the wrong man from being condemned? A retelling of Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. Chapter 1. The House of a Father. There are houses that hold love and houses that hold money, and then there was the house of Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov, which held neither, only appetite, the appetite of one old man who had spent 60 years feeding it and had never once been full. He was a small man run to fat, with a face that had learned, over a long and shameless life, to arrange itself into whatever expression would most disarm the person he intended to cheat. He had been a husband twice and a father 3 times and had loved, so far as anyone could determine, no one, not the 2 wives he had buried, not the 3 sons he had scattered like unwanted litters to be raised by servants and relatives and the charity of strangers. What he loved was the pleasure of the moment and the money that bought it. And by the autumn this story begins, he had a great deal of the second and an undiminished hunger for the first, and both of these facts were about to kill him. The 3 sons had come back. That was the strange gravity of the thing, that a man who had never wanted them under his roof as children should draw them all back as men, not by any love but by the 2 oldest forces in the world, money and a woman. Dmitri, the eldest, had come for the money. He was a soldier, or had been, a big handsome ruin of a man, all passion and no ballast, who loved and raged and wept in the same hour and meant every extremity of it while it lasted. His mother's small inheritance had passed through his father's hands, and Dmitri was convinced, been largely stolen there, and he had come home to demand what was left of it. And the demanding had become a war, a loud, public, furious war, conducted in taverns and doorways, in which Dmitri had told anyone who would listen that the old man was robbing him, that the old man was a thief and a scoundrel, and that one of these days, so help him God, he would kill him. He said it often. He said it drunk and he said it sober. Half the town had heard Dmitri Karamazov swear he would kill his father, and this, though no one knew it yet, was the first nail, driven early and by his own hand, into a coffin that would not be his father's alone. Ivan, the second son, had come for reasons he did not entirely explain, and stayed for reasons he explained even less. He was the clever one, the cold one, a writer of articles that troubled the clergy and delighted the young, an intellect so fine and so restless that it had reasoned its way out of every comfort a man might lean on. He did not believe in God. More than that, he had constructed in the long insomniac architecture of his mind a whole account of what followed from God's absence, and the conclusion of that account, which he had stated aloud more than once in that flat, brilliant voice of his, was very simple and very terrible. If there is no God, then everything is permitted. There is no crime. There is only what you can do and what you cannot. He said it as philosophy. He said it as a game of the mind. He did not yet understand that ideas do not stay in the minds that make them, that they climb down and walk about, and find hands willing to carry them out into the world. Alyosha, the youngest, had come for love, which in his case meant something the other 2 had no word for. He was gentle where they were violent, believing where they doubted, and he lived at the town monastery as a novice under the old monk Zosima, whom he loved as he had never been permitted to love his father. Everyone liked Alyosha. This was the plain miracle of him, that even the scoundrels and the drunkards softened in his presence, as though his simple, unarmed goodness reminded them of a self they had abandoned long ago. He alone among the brothers wished no one harm. He alone would try, when the darkness came, to stop it. And he alone, of everyone in this story, would prove the most utterly powerless to do so, for goodness without power is only witness. And this is a story about how much a good man is forced to witness and cannot prevent. And then there was the 4th one, the one no one counted. Smerdyakov was the cook. He was, the town whispered, Fyodor's own bastard, the child of a mute beggar woman the old man had used one drunken night, dead in the bearing of him, so that the boy had come into the world already motherless and already a joke, a servant in the house of the father who would not name him. He was epileptic, sullen, precise, and clever in a way that unsettled people, for it was the cleverness of a mind that had been given nothing to do but watch, and had watched, and had learned that it was smarter than every one of the masters it served. He waited on the family at table. He was in every room and counted in none. He had listened, silent, to every word Ivan ever spoke about God and permission and the crime that was not a crime. Listened the way dry ground listens to rain, and he had drawn conclusions of his own, and told no one, because no one had ever once asked Smerdyakov what he thought about anything at all. Over all of them hung the woman. Grushenka, beautiful, mercenary, wounded, and playing the father and the son against each other with a coldness that was really its own kind of wound, was the point where all the appetites met. Fyodor wanted her and had promised 3,000 rubles in an envelope, sealed and beribboned and hidden in his rooms, to any night she would give him. Dmitri wanted her and was mad with the wanting, and mad too with the certainty that his own stolen inheritance was being used as bait to buy the one thing he could not bear to lose. Between the father's lust and the son's fury, the house of Karamazov had become a loaded thing, cocked and trembling, waiting only for a hand. Everyone in the town could feel it. Everyone said, half in horror and half in the awful appetite people have for a coming catastrophe, that it would end badly, that one of these nights the old man and his eldest son would come to blood. They were right that it would end in blood. They were wrong, every one of them, about whose hand would spill it, and that error, shared by an entire town and never corrected in time, is the whole of what this story has to tell. Chapter 2, The Night, and What You Are About to Know. The night it happened was warm and moonless, and I am going to tell you now the thing that a mystery would keep from you until the end, because this is not that kind of story. This is a story about knowing, and about how little the knowing turns out to be worth. So Dmitri did not kill his father. Hold on to that, because for the next many pages the whole visible world will insist on the opposite, and the insisting will be so total, so reasonable, so buttressed at every point by fact, that you will feel the truth start to loosen in your own grip, even though I have just handed it to you plainly. That is the experience this story means to give you. That is what it was like to be the handful of people who knew. Here is what happened. Dmitri did go to the house that night. That much of what the town would later believe was true. He went in a frenzy, convinced Grushenka had gone to his father, convinced the sealed envelope of 3,000 rubles was about to buy the woman he loved, and he came over the garden wall like a man possessed, and he stood beneath his father's lit window with a brass pestle in his fist, heavy enough to crush a skull, and he wanted, God forgive him, in that moment he wanted to do it. He would confess as much later to anyone who asked, and many who did not, that he had stood there and felt murder rise in him like water. But he did not do it. Grushenka was not there, she had gone elsewhere, and Dmitri, discovering it, felt the madness drain out of him as suddenly as it had come. He turned. He went back over the wall. In his flight he struck the old family servant Grigory, who had woken and seized him, struck him with the pestle and left him bleeding on the ground. And this blow, this real and violent blow against a real and bleeding man, would later be folded seamlessly into the crime Dmitri did not commit, one true act of violence made to vouch for a false one. But Fyodor Pavlovitch was alive when Dmitri went back over that wall. Alive and awake, and waiting still at his lit window for a woman who was not coming. It was Smerdyakov who killed him. The cook had feigned one of his falling fits that day, had lain groaning and twitching so convincingly that the whole household believed him helpless in his bed, removed from all suspicion before there was anything to suspect. It was an alibi built in advance by a mind that had been building it, quietly, for a long time. When the house was empty of everyone but the old man, Smerdyakov rose and went to his father, for Fyodor was his father too, though no one counted it, and he used a signal only he and Fyodor knew, a certain pattern of knocks that meant Grushenka had come. And the old man, greedy and trusting to the last of the one servant he never troubled to fear, opened his door. And Smerdyakov killed him, and took the 3,000 rubles from behind the icon, where he alone had known they were hidden, and went back to his bed to groan and twitch until the household returned. He did it without passion. That was the horror of it, the thing that separated him from Dmitri, who had wanted to and could not, from Ivan, who reasoned and did not act. Smerdyakov felt no rage, no lust, no grief. He had simply listened for years to the clever son explain that in a world without God there is no crime, only what you can do and what you cannot, and he had believed it, entirely and literally, the way only a man with nothing left to lose can believe an idea. He had done what he could do. There was, in the account Ivan had taught him, no reason not to. And Ivan, this is the second thing you must know now, so that you can watch it work. Ivan half knew. Not the facts, not yet. But he had spoken to Smerdyakov the day before he left town, and Smerdyakov had said things, sidelong testing things, and had all but told him, in a language of hints and pauses, that something was going to happen while Ivan was conveniently away, and that Ivan, by leaving, was giving his permission. And Ivan had understood enough to be uneasy, and had chosen, this was his crime, the exact location of it, to leave anyway. To not ask the one more question that would have made it undeniable. To board the train and let the idea he had built walk down out of his mind and into his father's house on another man's feet. So when the old man was found in the morning, his skull broken, the envelope torn open and empty behind the icon, and the whole town rose up as one to say what it had been saying for months. The son did it. Dmitri did it. He swore he would, and now he has. There were, in all the world, exactly 3 people positioned to know or nearly know the truth. Ivan, who had half heard it coming and fled from the hearing. Alyosha, who knew his brother Dmitri too well in the soul to believe him a murderer, and who would come in time to see the rest. And Smerdyakov himself, who knew everything, and who held it inside his sullen, clever, patient silence like a coal he had no intention of ever handing to anyone who could use it. 3 people near the truth, and against them everything else. The pestle, the blood on Dmitri's hands from the servant he really had struck, the money Dmitri really had been flinging around that very night, the dozens of witnesses who had heard him swear to kill, his own wild half-confessions that he had wanted to, the sheer narrative perfection of the violent son destroying the monstrous father. The truth was 3 frightened, compromised, half-mad men. The lie was a machine, and every wheel of it turned smoothly, and it had already, before the body was cold, begun to grind toward a verdict. You know who did it now. Remember that you know. Because from here the story asks only one question, and it asks it of you as much as of anyone in it. When the truth is known, genuinely known by people who could speak it, what is it exactly that still lets the wrong man be destroyed? And which of the silent ones in the end is guiltiest of all? Chapter 3. The machine begins to turn. They arrested Dmitri before the day was out, and the terrible thing, the thing Alyosha would remember long afterward, was how reasonable it all was. No one acted in malice. Every man who helped to condemn his brother did so carefully, conscientiously, following the evidence exactly where it led, and the evidence led at every single step to Dmitri. This is the part that must be understood because it is the part that makes the whole nightmare possible. The machine was not corrupt. If it had been corrupt, it could have been fought. A bribed judge, a planted witness, a conspiracy, these are things a good man can expose and defeat. But there was no conspiracy against Dmitri Karamazov. There was only the truth, the ordinary visible truth, every fragment of it authentic, assembling itself with the blind patience of water finding its level into a shape that was completely and perfectly false. Consider what they had. They had a son who had sworn publicly, repeatedly, before a dozen witnesses that he would kill his father, Not once in a private rage, again and again in taverns in the street to anyone who would listen. I'll kill him. One of these days I'll kill the old man. Every one of those witnesses was telling the truth. Dmitri had said it. He had meant it in the way that furious men mean the unbearable things they say, which is to say he had meant the feeling and not the deed. But a court does not try feelings, it tries words, and the words were real and they were his. They had the blood. Dmitri had gone over the wall that night. He did not deny it. He had struck old Grigory with the pestle and left him for dead. He did not deny that either. There was the servant's blood, real blood, on Dmitri's own clothes and hands, and though it was the blood of an assault and not a murder, blood does not testify to its own origins. It simply sits there, red and damning, and lets the mind of every juror complete the story it is already halfway to believing. They had the money. Dmitri had been penniless and desperate for weeks, mad for 3,000 rubles to settle a debt of honor that was strangling him. And on the very night his father died with 3,000 rubles stolen from behind the icon, Dmitri had suddenly appeared in the next town with a fistful of cash, throwing it around a tavern in a delirium of spending. He swore the money was his own, half of a different sum he had been carrying secretly for weeks. It was even true. But it was the kind of truth no one believes. A coincidence so convenient it looked exactly like guilt, and the more desperately Dmitri explained it, the guiltier it made him sound. And they had the story. This was the strongest evidence of all, though it appeared in no document and was spoken by no witness. They had the shape of it, the shape that every human mind reaches for, the shape that satisfies. A monstrous father, a violent son, a woman and money and years of public hatred. It was a story the whole town had been telling itself for months, a story so complete and so satisfying that the murder, when it came, felt less like a shock than like a confirmation. Of course, Dmitri did it. It was the ending everyone had already written. The facts did not build the story. The story had been standing ready, and the facts simply walked into it and took their places, and any fact that did not fit, and there were such facts, was quietly not seen, because a mind that has found its story stops looking. Dmitri, for his part, did himself no good at all. He was incapable of it. Confronted, accused, he did not do the things an innocent man is supposed to do. He raved. He wept. He confessed wildly to everything and nothing. Yes, I wanted to kill him. I stood under his window with the pestle in my hand and I wanted to smash his skull. I am a scoundrel. I am capable of it, but I did not do it. Before God, I did not do it. And every juror who heard it heard only the first half. The I wanted to, the I am capable, and folded it into the verdict. His honesty about his own murderous heart, which was the truest and in some ways the finest thing about him, became the rope they hanged him with. He was too honest to pretend he had not wished his father dead, and in a court, wishing and doing wear the same face. Alyosha visited him in his cell and came away shaking. Not because Dmitri seemed guilty, Alyosha knew, in the place below evidence where he knew everything that mattered, that his brother had not done it. He came away shaking because he could see already, with perfect clarity, that it would not matter what he knew. He saw the machine. He saw every wheel of it turning true, and he understood that there was no lever anywhere that a good man could pull to stop it, because the machine was not broken. It was working exactly as it was built to work. It was taking real facts and producing a real verdict, and the verdict happened to be a lie, and there was no provision anywhere in the whole apparatus of human justice for the possibility that everything could be true and the conclusion still be false. "They're going to convict you," Alyosha said, very quietly, because his brother deserved not to be lied to. "I know," said Dmitri, and then with the strange lucidity that came to him sometimes between his storms, "The joke of it, Alyosha, is that they're not even wrong to. Look at me. Listen to what I've said. If I sat on that jury, I would convict me too." He laughed, a broken sound. "I wanted to kill him so badly that I've made it true. God is punishing me for the murder I did in my heart by making the world believe I did it with my hands. Maybe that's justice after all. Maybe that's the only justice there is." Alyosha had no answer. There was, he was beginning to understand, no answer. only the widening silence where the truth was known and could not be made to matter, and the three men who lived in that silence, each for his own reason unable to break it. Chapter 4. The weight Ivan carried. Ivan did not come back for the arrest. He read of it in a letter 3 towns away, and he sat with the letter in his hand for a long time, and then he was sick. He told himself at first that his sickness was grief. It was not grief. Ivan Karamazov had not loved his father and did not pretend to, and he was too honest in intellect, even now, to dress up what he felt in a costume it did not fit. What he felt was not grief. It was the specific, private horror of a man who has watched an idea he built with his own mind climb down off the page and kill someone. He went back over it again and again in the long sleepless nights that began now and would not end. The conversations with Smerdyakov, the cook sidelong testing questions. Is it true, Ivan Fyodorovich, what you wrote, that there's no such thing as a sin if a man doesn't believe? That everything's permitted? And Ivan, flattered, careless, the clever man enjoying the strange attentiveness of the clever servant, had confirmed it, had explained it, had honed it for him, sharpened the blade and handed it across the kitchen table, never once imagining that Smerdyakov was not a student of philosophy, but a man taking instructions. And that last conversation, the day before Ivan left, Smerdyakov saying, so quietly, so pointedly, that it was a good thing Ivan was going away, that a man was wise to be elsewhere when trouble came, that Ivan needn't worry, that everything would be, the word he'd used, arranged. And Ivan had understood. Some part of him had understood exactly what was being offered and exactly what his leaving would mean, and he had looked at that understanding, and he had turned away from it, and he had gotten on the train. He had not asked. That was the whole of his guilt, and it was total. He had made himself not ask the question whose answer he already knew, so that he could tell himself afterward that he had not known. If there is no God, everything is permitted. He had said it as a proposition, a cold, clean toy of the mind. Smerdyakov had heard it as permission, heard it correctly, Ivan now realized, heard it more honestly than Ivan himself had ever dared to. For if the idea were true, then it was permission for exactly this, and Smerdyakov had simply been the one man ruthless enough to follow the thought all the way to its hands. Ivan had wanted the idea without its consequences. He had wanted to stand at the edge of the abyss and admire the view and never fall in. And Smerdyakov had jumped, holding Ivan's idea like a stone, and it was Fyodor who had been crushed at the bottom, and Dmitri who would hang for it, and Ivan who had to go on living at the top of the cliff knowing he had drawn the map. He could stop it. That was the thing that made the nights unbearable. He could stop it. He could go back and go to the authorities and say, my brother did not do this. The cook did it. I know because I taught him how to think his way to it, and he all but told me it was coming and I left so that it could. He could say that. The words existed. His mouth could form them. But to say them was to destroy himself. Not to hang, he had committed no act the law could reach, but to stand before the world and confess that he, Ivan Karamazov, the brilliant one, the cold, clean intellect, was the true author of his father's murder, the mind behind the hands. To say it was to admit that his ideas were not toys, that thoughts have weight and edges and can kill, that he was not a spectator of the human catastrophe but a cause of it. Everything he was, the whole proud architecture of the man who reasoned above the herd, who saw through God and morality and the comfortable lies of ordinary men, all of it would come down, and what would be left standing in the rubble was simply a murderer who had used another man's hands. And so Ivan did exactly what he had done before on the train. He looked at what he knew, and he turned away from it, and he was silent. He told himself he needed proof. He told himself Smerdyakov would deny it and he'd only look mad. He told himself a dozen reasonable things, each one true, each one a small, clean plank laid over the pit so that he would not have to look down into it. And under all the reasons was the one reason, the only one, that he could not bear to be what he was. He would break. Anyone could see it who looked at him. Alyosha saw it and was frightened. Ivan's brilliant mind denied the one confession that might have saved it, turned inward and began, slowly, to devour itself. He argued with a devil no one else could see. He wept and did not know he was weeping. The idea he had built to prove he was free of God's law was proving instead that a man cannot escape the law by disbelieving in it, that guilt does not require heaven to enforce it, that a conscience is quite capable of hanging a man all by itself, in a locked room, with no God present at all. 3 men knew the truth. Smerdyakov held it as a weapon and would not spend it. Alyosha held it as a certainty and had no power to make it evidence. And Ivan held it as a confession he could not survive making. And of the 3 silences, his was the loudest and the most damning and the one that would cost the most, because his was the only silence that could have spoken, and chose, again and again, not to. The trial was set. The town waited, satisfied, for the ending it had already written. And somewhere in the machinery a clever cook lay quiet in his room, having killed a man and lost a brother to the gallows for it, and felt this was perhaps the strangest thing of all: no triumph and no fear and nothing much at all. He had done what could be done. In a world without God, there was nothing else to feel. Chapter 5. The Confession That Killed Itself. Ivan went to Smerdyakov 3 times, and it was the 3rd time that finished them both. The first 2 visits had been circling things, feints, 2 clever men each pretending not to understand the other while understanding perfectly. But by the 3rd, Ivan had stopped being able to pretend, and he came into the cook's small, clean room like a man coming to the edge of a cliff to look, at last, all the way down. Smerdyakov was much changed. The sullen watchfulness had curdled into something worse, a flat, spent stillness, the stillness of a man who has done the one thing his whole life was pointed at and found nothing on the other side of it. He was ill, the fits had worsened, but it was not the illness that had hollowed him. It was the aftermath. He had followed the idea all the way to its end, and the end had been empty, and now he sat in the emptiness with nowhere left to go. "You knew," Ivan said. "You knew I'd come." "I knew," said Smerdyakov. And then, without drama, in the mild, reasonable voice of a servant reporting on the household accounts, he told him, all of it, the feigned fit, the signal at the door, the old man opening it, greedy and trusting, the 3,000 rubles behind the icon. He told it plainly, holding nothing back, and the plainness was the most horrifying thing of all, because there was no guilt in it anywhere. No more than there would have been in a man describing how he had slaughtered a pig for the winter. And then he said the thing Ivan had crossed 3 towns and 3 visits, and the whole ruin of his own mind to hear, and it was worse than anything Ivan had imagined. "You did it, Ivan Fyodorovitch, not me. I was only the hands." He said it gently, almost kindly. "It was your idea, all of it. That there's no God and so there's no law, and so a clever man may do what a clever man can do, and the only sin is being caught by fools who still believe. I only listened. I only believed you more than you believed yourself. That's the whole of the difference between us. You said everything is permitted and you meant it as talk, and I heard that you meant it, underneath the talk, the way a man means the thing he's afraid to do. And you wanted him dead. Don't say you didn't. You wanted the money and you wanted to be free of him and you wanted it done. You only didn't want to be the one holding the pestle." He almost smiled. "So I held it for you. I was your hands and you were my head, and between us we killed him, and now your brother will hang and you and I will go on breathing. That's the arrangement. That was always the arrangement. You knew it when you got on the train." Ivan sat very still. Every word was true. He had come for a confession and received an accusation, and the accusation was just, that was the unbearable core of it. The accusation was just. He was guiltier than the man who had swung the weapon, because he was the one who had made the swinging thinkable, and he had done it while keeping his own hands clean and his own conscience insured, and he had gotten on the train. "I'll tell them," Ivan said. "I'll tell them everything, tomorrow, at the trial. I'll stand up and I'll tell them what you did and what I am." And here Smerdyakov did the last cruel thing, the thing that sealed the whole machine shut forever. And he did it, characteristically, by doing nothing at all. He took out the money. The 3,000 rubles, most of it kept all this time. He set it on the table between them. "There's your proof," he said. "The only proof there is. Take it, show it to them." He watched Ivan's face. "But think, Ivan Fyodorovich, before you do. Who are you? The dead man's son who wanted his money and his death. The brother of the accused, come to save him with a wild story about the cook. You've been ill, everyone's seen it. You talk to the air, you weep at nothing. You'll stand up in that court, the mad brother, waving money you can't account for, and say the idiot cook did it on the strength of a philosophy nobody but you understands. And I?" His voice did not change at all. "I will deny every word. I'll be very calm. I'll be the poor simple servant, sick and slandered by the desperate family. And they will believe me because I will be calm and you will be raving, and the calm man is always believed over the raving one. You taught me that too, without meaning to. Appearances are the only truth a court can see." Ivan took the money. His hand was shaking. "You won't be there to deny it," he said. "I'll bring you. I'll drag you into that court myself." "No," said Smerdyakov, mild as ever. "I don't think you will." And that night alone, he hanged himself, the one act that made his confession forever unprovable, the last locked door pulled shut from the inside. A dead man cannot be cross-examined. A dead man's private admission to his half-mad brother is not evidence. It is a rumor, a delusion, a thing the grieving imagine. Smerdyakov, who had taken Ivan's idea more seriously than Ivan ever had, followed it to its final logic. In a world without God, without judgment, without meaning, there was no reason to live and no reason to fear death and no reason, above all, to let himself be used to save Dmitri Karamazov, whom he had always despised. He killed his father because he could. He killed himself because he could. And between the two he arranged things so that the truth, fully confessed, would die with him, leaving Ivan holding a bag of money and a story that would sound, in the cold light of a courtroom, exactly like madness. Which is precisely what it sounded like the next day, when Ivan tried to tell it. Chapter 6: The Trial. The courtroom was full. The whole province had come, for a parricide is the rarest and richest of spectacles, and the crowd settled in with the awful contentment of people about to watch a story they already know reach the ending they have already approved. The evidence went as evidence goes when the machine is running true. The witnesses to Dmitri's threats truthful all. The blood real. The money unexplained to any satisfaction. The learned prosecutor rose and built out of every authentic fact a portrait so coherent and so damning that it seemed less an argument than a simple description of reality. The wild, dissolute son, the years of hatred, the woman, the debt, the sworn threats made flesh at last on a moonless night. He did not lie once. He did not need to. He had the story, and the facts had already arranged themselves inside it, and all he had to do was point. And then Ivan Karamazov stood up. He had not been called to say what he said. He rose in the middle of the proceedings, gray-faced, swaying slightly, and demanded to be heard, and there was in his manner already the thing that would doom him, the wildness, the wrongness, the visible fracture of a man not entirely in his mind. The room went still with the particular hush that greets a scandal. "It was not my brother," Ivan said. "It was the servant, Smerdyakov. He killed our father," a murmur rising. "And I," his voice climbed, cracked, "I told him to, not in words, with an idea. I taught him that everything is permitted, that there is no God and so no crime, and he believed me and he did it, and I knew he would, and I left so that he could. I am the murderer. I am the one. My brother wanted it, but I made it. Do you understand? The thought was mine." He pulled out the money, 3,000 rubles thrown down on the rail before the judges. There's the money he stole. He gave it to me. He confessed it all to me 2 nights ago in his room. "And where is this servant now?" someone asked. The presiding judge, gently as one speaks to the sick. "Dead. He hanged himself last night." Even as he said it, Ivan heard how it sounded, heard the whole thing collapse in the saying, the only witness dead by his own hand, the money in the accuser's own possession, the accuser himself a man visibly unraveling before their eyes, weeping now, arguing now with something to his left that was not there, crying out to a devil only he could see. "You put me up to this," he said to the empty air beside him. "You did your laughing." They led him out. Gently, with pity, with murmured concern for the poor young man, the second Karamazov son to be destroyed by this terrible business, driven out of his wits by grief and brain fever. His testimony was entered as the ravings of a sick man. It changed nothing. If anything, it hardened the verdict, for a jury that has just watched one brother collapse into madness raving about devils and disembodied ideas is not inclined to doubt its judgment of the other. The wildness ran in the blood, they thought. Look at them, look at the family. Alyosha sat through all of it and could do nothing. He knew. He had known for weeks, had pieced it together, had spoken to Ivan, had believed him utterly. But what could Alyosha offer? He had no proof either, only certainty, and certainty is not admissible. He could stand and say, "I believe my brother Dmitri is innocent because I know his soul," and it would be the truth, and it would be worth exactly nothing, less than nothing. The loyal little brother saying what a loyal little brother would say. The one true thing he possessed, his knowledge of who his brothers were, all the way down, was the one kind of thing a court is built to exclude. Justice cannot run on the knowledge of the heart. It would be too dangerous, too unprovable, too easily faked. And so it runs on facts instead, on the visible and the demonstrable. And on that moonless night, the visible and the demonstrable had all, every one, lined up behind a lie. The jury did not take long. They came back with the word the whole province had come to hear, the word that had been written months before the murder in the mind of every person who had ever heard Dmitri swear at his father in a tavern. Guilty. Dmitri stood to receive it, and he did not rave and he did not weep. He had done all his raving already. He stood very straight, the big, ruined, handsome man, and he looked at the 12 who had condemned him, and then at Alyosha, and something passed between the two brothers that had no words in it. 20 years in Siberia. For a murder he had wanted with his whole heart and had not in the end committed, condemned by his own honesty about the wanting, by the real blood of a real blow, by a story too satisfying to resist, and by 3 men who knew the truth and could not, between them, make it weigh one feather against the machine. "I did not kill my father," Dmitri said, into the great satisfied silence of the room. He said it quietly. No one believed him. It was the truest sentence spoken in that courtroom all day, and it fell into the crowd and vanished without a ripple, the way the truth had vanished from the very first, drowned not by lies but by facts, condemned not by malice but by the ordinary blind machinery of men who were, every one of them, only doing their honest best. Chapter 7. After the verdict. The town went home satisfied, and this was perhaps the most terrible thing of all, not the verdict itself, but the ease with which the world closed over it, like water over a stone. Justice had been done. The monstrous father was avenged, the violent son was punished, the story had reached its proper end. Within a week people had stopped talking of it. Within a month it was simply a thing that had happened, filed away under the general heading of how such families come to such ends. The machine had run and produced its result, and moved on, and left 3 men and a woman to live in the wreckage of a truth that no longer mattered to anyone but them. Ivan did not recover. The brain fever that had seized him in the courtroom deepened, and for a long time he lay between worlds, arguing with his devil, and when at last the fever broke and left him lucid, the lucidity was almost worse. For now he had to live sane, inside the full knowledge of what he was and what he had failed to prevent. He had spoken the truth at the end. This was the cruelest joke his conscience played on him. He had stood up in that courtroom and confessed everything, named the killer, named his own guilt, offered the money. He had done, finally, the brave thing, the very thing whose omission had damned him. And it had come too late and in too broken a form to save anyone, and so it counted for nothing, and he was left to understand that a confession made when no one can believe it is not absolution. It is only one more torment, the torment of having told the truth and been dismissed for it, of knowing that even his courage had been useless. He kept the idea too. That was the thing he could not put down. If there is no God, everything is permitted. He had built it, and it had killed his father and destroyed his brother, and hollowed out the cook into a man who could murder and die without feeling either, and Ivan still could not prove it false. That was the abyss he lived in now. He had watched his own philosophy work, watched it operate in the world with perfect efficiency, and he could not, even now, even after everything, find the flaw in it that would let him renounce it and be free. He had only discovered, at ruinous cost, that a man cannot actually live inside it, that the mind may accept everything is permitted while the conscience, which asked no one's permission to exist, quietly hangs you for it anyway. He had disproved God to his own satisfaction, and found that something remained behind, in the dark, keeping accounts, something that did not need to be believed in to send in its bill. Dmitri went to Siberia, and here, in the deepest strangeness of the whole affair, something happened that none of the machinery had foreseen. For Dmitri, who had not killed his father, who was innocent of the deed, did not go as an innocent man wronged. He went, somehow, as a man accepting a punishment. "I did not kill him," he told Alyosha on the last day, "but I wanted to, and I am not clean, none of us is clean, and if I must suffer for a murder, let me suffer for the one I did in my heart, and for all the murders that all of us do in our hearts and are never caught for. I'll go for the child. I'll go for everyone. Someone has to answer, and it might as well be me." It was not justice. It was something stranger and older than justice. A man volunteering to carry a weight the world had assigned him wrongly, and finding, in the carrying, the one thing the courtroom could never have given him, a way to be redeemed by a suffering he did not deserve. The verdict was a lie. What Dmitri chose to make of it was the only truth in the whole story that anyone freely chose. And Alyosha remained. Alyosha, who had known everything and prevented nothing, who had sat through the trial with the truth burning in him and no way to spend it, who had watched one brother go mad and another go to chains. Alyosha, of them all, had to find a way to go on living in a world where this could happen, where the machine could run true and produce a lie, where the good could see clearly and be powerless, and the guilty could confess and be disbelieved, and the innocent could be swallowed whole by nothing worse than everyone doing their honest best. He did not lose his faith. This surprised him in the raw aftermath as much as it would surprise anyone. He had every reason to. If ever a series of events was built to prove that there is no God, no justice, no order behind the visible, that the universe is only a blind machine grinding out its verdicts on the innocent, it was this one. And yet Alyosha found, when he looked into himself, that the very thing which made the verdict a horror was itself the proof he could not argue away. For if there were truly no God, no law but what men can enforce, if Ivan were right and everything were permitted, then Dmitri's conviction would not be a tragedy. It would simply be an outcome, one arrangement of matter following another, of no more moral weight than a rockslide. The fact that it was unbearable, the fact that every soul who knew the truth felt it as a wound, that the injustice screamed against something in them that would not be quiet, that was the evidence. You cannot be outraged by injustice in a universe that contains no justice to be offended against. The wound proved the standard. The grief proved the God. Smerdyakov's emptiness, Ivan's private gallows, Dmitri's need to answer for a sin, all of it testified to the same thing, that everything is permitted is a sentence a man can say but not survive, because there is something in him, put there by he knows not what, that keeps insisting otherwise even as his reason denies it. So this is how the story ends, and it does not end the way the town believed, with justice done. It ends with justice failed completely, visibly, irreparably, an innocent man in chains, a guilty man in the ground, a brilliant man in ruins, and a whole province gone comfortably home. And it ends, at the very same time, with the only three people who knew the truth each finding, in the wreckage, the thing the machine could not touch. Ivan his terrible honesty, Dmitri his freely chosen suffering, Alyosha his stubborn and now unbreakable faith. The verdict took everything that could be seen and measured and proven. It could not reach the other thing, the thing below the evidence, the thing no court admits and no machine can grind, the thing that knew and grieved, and would not call the lie a truth no matter how many honest men agreed to. You knew who killed him, you knew from the second chapter, and you watched exactly as they watched the wrong man be destroyed while the truth stood by, known and helpless. That was the point. Not to ask who did it, you were never in doubt. To ask the harder question, the one the whole story was built to leave in your hands. When the truth is known and cannot be made to matter, when the machine is not broken but working and grinds the innocent anyway, what is left? What survives the failure of every visible justice? Only what the three brothers found. The refusal in the private dark where no court can see to agree that the lie is the truth. It saves no one. It changes no verdict. And it is, this story insists to the last, the single most important thing a human being can do, because it is the only thing the machine, for all its perfect and terrible efficiency, has never once been able to reach. The end.